Get my 6. Get mine too. Potentially. What's up, guys, girls? You might be wondering why I'm wearing this DAP Halloween shirt that is obviously 2 sizes too small for me. You might be thinking it's perhaps to show off my recently renewed physique of training, not just exercising, but actually training. But that's not why. It was because I could either wear the DAP shirt or I could wear the Hello Kitty shirt. What would you do? Because the shirt that Tim, Sandy, Joey, and Sean sent for me is being worn right now by my beautiful bride Dearly, aka Giggly Girl. Not that she doesn't appreciate the one sent for her. It actually just came out of the dryer, along with this one that was sent for our son Daniel, who loves to dap and dance. She plans on wearing this next time we go into town, but she loves to wear my clothes around the house because they fit her like nightgowns and stuff. I chase my house slippers down a dozen times a day. I'll like take them off to go run, come back, they're not where I left them. I'll take them off to get in the shower, come out, they're not where I left them. She even, down to my house slippers, she likes to go around the house in my house slippers. So anyway, Tim, Sandy, Joey, Sean, thank you so much for the Halloween shirts. And Carrie D, an old woman down in Georgia, thanks again for always recommending I drink water or coffee when I make these videos. On the way up here to make this one, I remember the time I was up here and I had no water and I had no coffee. And I was about 2 minutes short of finishing a video that was something like half an hour long. And the story had just flowed. It was being well told. At least, I mean, that's just what I think. And that's what, like, most people think. But, of course, there are some people out there who think reading their owner's manual on their vehicles is more enjoyable than to listen to these stories. But I was 2 minutes away from finishing a 30-minute story. And I had a gnat go down my throat and get stuck, you know, in my trachea. We've all been there, done that. You start coughing. You can start to panic and think you're going to die. Got to have water to clear your throat. I had nothing up here. My house is a quarter of a mile away down the hill down there. I finished that entire 2 minutes, faking it until I made it. I think a couple of times I made it look like I was clearing my throat, but I finished. Then I sprinted a quarter of a mile in record time to get to some water. So thanks, Carrie D in Georgia, for reminding me, you know, that first, hey, drink that coffee and then go find that Bigfoot. Or maybe on the bottom it says Sasquatch. Wow, like that wasn't an obvious tree knock. Bigfoot, Sasquatch. You hear it? Let's not press our luck. We wouldn't want to get a whammy. All right, so not only am I wearing these Halloween shirts, well, one of them, but because these shirts were sent to us, but also because here it is, we're in the middle of October. As of this recording, October 12, it is the Halloween season where all things go. Goose and ghouls and creepy crawlies, and of course I hope no creepy crawlies show up during the filming of this video today, because I certainly wouldn't want to sit here frozen in fear. as they creepy crawled all around me. Okay. 3 nights ago, I think it was, this past weekend, Friday night. It wasn't Saturday, because Saturday we were watching UVA beat the Louisville Cardinals in football for the first. That's the first time in the history of UVA that we've ever won a football game anywhere in the state of Kentucky, and that's a week after upsetting Miami, winning both games by missed field goals. We were ahead of Miami by 2. We were ahead of Louisville by 3. Both teams had an opportunity to either tie or win the game in the final seconds with short field goals. Miami's 33 yards, I think. They both missed. It was amazing. So it was Saturday. We watched The Conjuring Part 3. Who's seen that? Raise your hands. I tell you, I hope they come up with a Part 4, because this is the best horror / scary movie series, I think, in 20 years. I don't think there's been anything this good since Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer. Since then, just in my opinion. If I'm wrong, correct me in the comments section, because I'm aggressively looking for more scary movies to watch between now and Halloween. But that's a movie that, of course, deals with possession. It's called The Devil Made Me Do It. And it was a real, actual court case where the judge allowed testimony from these, the wife, she's a clairvoyant. The spirit world can kind of, she kind of has like a link, like she is kind of a portal, and they can communicate from their side to ours through her, and she can see what's going on. It was the first time, it wasn't the first time evidence as such was allowed to be presented in a court of law. I think 2 or 3 other times before that it was, but those cases were lost. It's the first time a case was actually, I don't want to give any spoilers. Because if you haven't seen it yet, I don't want to ruin it for you, but go watch it. It's a great movie. But it reminded me of a story, a story that was told to me by an old man who is about 90 right now. Many years ago, he told me this story, and I'm going to tell it to you today. It has to do with, is it possession, or the idea of clairvoyance? This goes beyond being an empath. That deals with people. That's a whole nother topic. But this clairvoyance concept, this is spiritual. Phenomenal. Having a third eye, it's often called. Being able to see through the veil. So, my friend's name is Andy, and I made a video a few years ago about the best way, how to start a chainsaw in cold weather. And some people said it was clickbait. I don't know why. I mean, if you didn't see it, I'm going to tell you pretty much what the video was. I wanted to come out and, saw up some logs and some, just above freezing temperature. Because, you don't want to do that if temperatures are below freezing, because the logs freeze. They're mostly moisture if they haven't dried out that much. Turns to ice, it'll dull the teeth on your chainsaw, right? But it was in the upper 30s, just before we got to freezing. I like to saw them into lengths just before they freeze, and then when they're frozen, split them with an axe, because you barely touch it, and they just split like ice, like they become like icicles. So a lot of times saws can be hard to start when the weather's cold. And so I just made this video about, here's the best way to start a chainsaw in cold weather. What you do is the night before, you're going to saw up your wood, you make sure you bring your chainsaw in the house. Bigfoot Sasquatch. All right. Isn't that, I learned this from an old guy who I haven't seen him for a couple of years. I should go see him. But when I went and saw him a few years back, and he was in his mid to late 80s, still splitting, stacking his own firewood with an axe and a maul. So I just viewed it as wise. I don't know why everybody on social media got upset about it. Whatever. You know, my son told me here a couple weeks ago, he was coming home on the bus from school, and some kid comes up to him and he says, "Hey, Daniel, I found your dad's YouTube channel. I've been watching it for the last 2 months." And Daniel was like, "Okay." He says, "All those videos your dad makes, it's clickbait." And Daniel was like, "Okay." He goes, "Why does he do that? That just pisses people off." He goes, "Well, why do you watch the videos?" He goes, "Because I can't stop. I've been watching them for 2 months." And Daniel was like, "Okay." And then the kid walked back up to his bus seat. Okay. And we don't make these videos for kids. We just try to keep things PG rated. And I guess, you know, when YouTube recommends your stuff to all these people every now and then, somebody's going to see it. So this one will be PG rated. And with no further ado, as my beautiful bride dearly would say, I will now get on with the show, because the show must go on. So I was cutting firewood, and it happened to be in October. I know, because we're just getting ready to go into the burning season with my friend Andy. And this was almost 20 years ago when I lived here the first time. Since it was October, we were talking about all things October, which would include Halloween. And he asked me, he goes, you know, after we're talking about memories, trick-or-treating, all these things, he says, "Do you believe in that ghosty, ghouly, creepy, crawly stuff?" And my answer through most of my life has been, well, I don't know. It's not that I believe, and it's not that I disbelieve. I believe there's a lot of stuff out there that's possible. And he told me that he had a great uncle that went through an amazing experience that has become one of the best family stories passed down from generation to generation throughout his family. And it had to do with this concept of clairvoyance, or being able to see things others couldn't, having that third eye. Great uncle. So that would have been his uncle's uncle, or his aunt's uncle. He would have been born about 1930. So let's go back 30 years for his parents, and then another 30 years before that. So we're going back to about 1870, just a little while after the end of the Civil War. And of course, this is down here in the South, Virginia, where this took place. His family's been down here for a long time. He told me he had a great uncle who was a fantastic artist. His specialty was charcoal and pencil. He could look at a subject matter, like a person, which happened to be his specialty, people, and he could draw them out with note to self, edit that dead space out. Gotta stay hydrated. Edit dead space out. Gotta stay hydrated. Well, I think we definitely heard a tree knock there, huh? So, Andy's great uncle, he could draw like a charcoal caricature of people that looked like better than photography at the time. Remember, right after the end of the Civil War. And this is how he made his money. And he had to go on the road to do it because the population of the country back then wasn't nearly like it is now, where, you know, you could just go, for instance, down into Charlottesville, where we live, you know, outside, of course, of town. But if we went down in town, just thousands of people a day, and you could, you know, draw your pictures and make your money and go home, and you never have to leave, you know, close to where you were from. But this was a time when, I mean, you would have to cross the entire state to see as many people as you could see in one town, of course, now. So Andy's great uncle spent most of his life on the road. He would go around to some of the larger towns, and he would make his money drawing people, and that's how he supported his family. He was in his 30s at the time, mid-30s, had a wife and like probably 12 kids. It was 1870. But in between cities, especially back then, you would go forever and ever before you'd hit another town. But along the way, they had inns. And there's a really neat one here in Charlottesville. We go to a couple times a year to just eat. They have an all-you-can-eat buffet. I think my beautiful bride, Dearly, a.k.a. Giggly Girl, made a video one time of us doing it here recently. Put it on her YouTube channel, Life with Dearly, which you must go watch if you haven't. She's so cute and adorable. And you might see the other Halloween shirt they sent us because she's always wearing my clothes. Thanks, Tim, Kristen, Sean, and Joey. But Mickey Tavern actually used to be one of these types of inns. It sits just below Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's home. They moved it from a completely different side of the county in its original spot. It was one of those old inns, and in the 1930s, I think it was the Albemarle County Historic Society moved it piece by piece by horseback and buggy or whatever over to where it is now. But that's an example of these inns. You could come there, you could have your meal, you know, have your dinner, sit in front of the fireplace, drink gruel or whatever it was. It was probably like beer, out of pewter cups so you could get brain damage and all that stuff. And then, of course, you could sleep there at night. So Andy's great uncle spent a lot of time in these types of inns because of his work. Well, the story is that one of these inns he came to, the innkeeper opened the door. It was just before dark, and he said, you know, you're in luck. We have one room available. There was a couple, you know, a woman and a man who were supposed to stay for another night, but for some reason this morning they checked out. The woman was really upset about something. So if you're looking for a place to stay, we have it. And Andy's great uncle was like, well, yeah, that's why I'm here. You know, I'm an artist. I draw. I'm on my way to Richmond. He was somewhere between Charlottesville and Richmond to, you know, try to make some money doing these drawings. And the guy asked him, well, what is it that you draw? And he says, well, my specialty is people. He goes, oh, you've got to meet my niece. She's beautiful. She's young. She's gorgeous. She would make a perfect model. You've got to let her sit for you. And he says, well, perhaps another time. I'm going to stay one night and leave. And he goes, well, you're in luck. She's the barmaid. She works here. She helps me run this inn. So the guy goes to the, you know, dining area, sees the girl, and she's absolutely gorgeous. Gorgeous. The innkeeper was a man of his words. Cut dead space out. Time to hydrate. So Andy's great uncle, he's having his dinner, drinking his stale beer, also known as gruel, out of a pewter cup so he could get brain damage. And he's talking to the girl, and he says, I would love to draw you. When would be a good time? And she said, well, you know, you're my only customer eating here. The moon is full. We have a courtyard out back, open space. The lighting would be wonderful. How about after you eat? So he's like, hey, why not? Get work out of the way and get a good night's sleep, go on to Richmond the next day. So he finishes his meal. They go out into the courtyard. It's beautiful. There's a bench where she's sitting. The moon is so bright because it's, so full. It's almost as if it's daytime. It's like he's drawing her during the day. So he draws her, looks just like her on the canvas. She comes around and she's so overwhelmed with how great, of a job this guy did. She just, what's the word? When you have a sudden release of emotions, cathartic. It was a very cathartic experience for her. Okay, that's when you feel almost unmanageable emotions as a result of viewing, hearing, listening to, or reading art. That's why so many people love these videos, because they're so cathartic. Except for those who would rather read their vehicle's owner's manual or whatever. So anyway, in a moment of catharticism, she kissed him. Well, what she didn't know is that the artist had a brother whose family was recently torn apart because he cheated on his wife with a young, beautiful temptress like this. So he pushes her off. He's like, get behind thee, Satan, wicked woman. It's your fault you're so beautiful. And he storms out. Well, as he was doing that, there were a few other people coming into the courtyard who were staying at the inn. 2 other couples. They couldn't sleep. The moon was too bright. Well, what they saw was an argument. They saw an argument. And this guy storming out of there. And the girl, she's crying. She realizes what she did was inappropriate and she didn't mean to do it. Daggone catharticism, I'm sorry. If those of you watching this video is like leaning over, kissing somebody right now beside you. Hey, don't hate the artist, hate the art. So anyway, the next morning, the artist's room is open by local law enforcement. They're arresting him. Why? Because the young girl's dead, and he walked away from his canvas, his painting, his art, everything. But on the sheet behind the canvas, there was a picture drawn of this beautiful young girl with a pair of hands around her neck getting strangled. And beside that canvas, they found that girl that morning dead, having been strangled. So they take this guy off, backwoods kangaroo, backwater court, convict him as guilty, sentence him to death. They're going to hang him. And he's like, I didn't do this. I did not do this. The innkeeper actually defended this guy, saying, I met this guy. I have no reason to believe this guy did it. I think there's somebody else out there, a killer on the loose perhaps, that might do this to somebody else. You can't just pin it on this guy, because he couldn't explain, this picture, this drawing. He remembered having gotten up in the middle of the night, and he doesn't know why, because it's like he remembers he's up, but then the next thing you know, he's being woken up as he's being arrested. But he did remember having a very strange dream that he was seeing this woman being killed. So while he's locked up, waiting to be hanged, the innkeeper kept supporting him, brought him his artwork. He said, come on, draw, you obviously saw her dying even though you're not aware of it. Maybe you'll see her killer. And the guy's like, none of this makes sense to me. I have no clue how this happened. He felt he was being set up maybe by somebody that had a grudge against him that was following him on his trip. That was his defense in trial, but it didn't work. So the night before he was to be hanged, he remembered waking up. He remembered being awake in his cell, but not knowing why, and having charcoal in his hand, realizing where he was as if he were sleepwalking. So he dropped the charcoal and went back to bed. The next morning, when he awakened, there was another picture. It was a picture of a woman with her arms out, strangling somebody by the neck. The innkeeper, being there that morning early to try to plead with the law enforcement officials not to kill this guy that he believed was innocent, recognized the woman in the drawing. It was the woman who was married to the man who had left a day early than the day that artist had gotten there to spend the night. And he pleaded with the law enforcement officials. He said, look, here's the story. They were angry. They were arguing. And he said, my gut was telling me it was this. The woman happened to be about 10 years older than the man in that marriage. And the man was paying a considerable bit of attention to his niece, the barkeep. And he could tell the older woman, the wife, was insanely jealous. And he believed that if they were to go find her and question her, that they would find that she was the murderer. So they gave a temporary stay of execution that day, the day Andy's great uncle was to be hanged. They knew where this woman was staying because she recorded her home address when she stayed at the inn. They went and they found her, and she coughed up to it. Turns out she only lived about a half hour's horseback ride from this inn. They had gone to stay there not so much because they were traveling, but because they just wanted a break from home. And as it turned out, the wife thought that her younger husband was messing around with one of their gardeners. As it turned out, he was. So they were trying to get a break from that, try to reconcile their differences. So they left that morning, and then at some point in the day, the husband, said he was going to go see a cousin or something, and that he'd be back the next day. The woman, not trusting him, thinking she was going back to the inn to be with the girl, got on another horse and went back to the inn. She found her husband's horse a couple hundred yards away from the inn, tied her horse up at the same spot and walked up. Now, by the time she got there, the scene had been had, as far as, the artist kind of yelling at the girl, calling her all these bad things because she was just so pretty. That had to be her fault. The people had seen it. This was much later, several hours later. But what she did find when she walked into that courtyard was her husband and that barkeep going at it. So she hid, she waited. When they were done, she witnessed them kissing, and she heard her husband saying, hey, I'll be back in a week's time. He left. The girl got dressed, and as she was leaving, the older woman comes up from behind and strangles the life out of her. And she confessed to all this when being questioned. And since she was a woman, and back then they thought that, this is history, folks. They thought women were feeble-minded, and so if a woman were to actually kill somebody, it wasn't her fault, because it was the fault of her feeble mind. And so I think she got like 6 months probation. But anyway, Andy's great uncle didn't have to hang for killing somebody because his mind was not feeble, because he had not yet drank enough stale beer, aka gruel, out of a pewter mug by that time. The end.